And we are live. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for the 118th week of the Free Assange Vigil series. Got a lot of fun friends. David McBride will be jumping in a minute. We have Glory Jones, Al Rodriguez, Savage Joy. Magnus should be jumping in as well in a little bit.
Almost had it. Almost had it. Al Suarez.
Oh my God.
But there's a filmmaker with the last name Rodriguez that I like a lot.
Someone needs to get clips of me butchering my guests' names as I introduce them. It's a. Anyways, I am going to run through the numbers real quick. We have 3,951 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. We have 915 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the US and the UK for a $4.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund to the nation of Ecuador. We have 276 days since District Judge Vanessa Baratzer's January 6 ruling denying Julian Assange bail after personally ordering his release and ruling no extradition in his case. We have 1,506 days of inhumane pretrial detention for the alleged Vault 7 whistleblower Joshua Schultz. At least 1,048 of those days have been spent under special administrative measures. We have 914 days since the political persecution of Ola Bini started by the hands of the Ecuadorian government. We have 126 days since Commander X was illegally taken from Mexico and rendition to the United States by DEA agents, and we have 76 days of detention served by former UK diplomat and journalist Craig Murray for the crime of publishing. And in those charges against him, the British Crown cite his publication of Julian Assange's 2020 court trial to show why he is such an impactful journalist and should be prosecuted. We have 122 days in good news since whistleblower Reality Winner was moved to house arrest and is expected to be put on parole November 23rd. We have 574 days of freedom for whistleblower Chelsea Manning, who still does regularly stream to Twitch. We have 224 days of freedom for the Global Intelligence File whistleblower Jeremy Hammond. Although he still does have a strict parole, he is quickly approaching 1 year of relatives freedom. With us tonight, we did just have David jump in and Magnus, so super excited about that. First, though, I do want to kick it over to Glory Jones to talk a little bit about what's happening with Commander X, since that is one of the more breaking things that we have this evening, as far as events that are coming up for him next week and that kind of stuff. So if you could, Glory, let everybody know what's happening with the events and where his trial's at right now.
So we've just gotten some pretty significant developments, actually. We heard from his lawyer that because of some developments that happened in the case with relation to having to await discovery from the prosecution, that the previously scheduled hearing on October 12th, which is this coming Tuesday, is not going to happen. We've gotten word from his lawyer, and his lawyer wants any supporters of Commander X to know that. So there won't be a court hearing on October 12th. They're looking to try and reschedule it for November 9th. Commander X still kind of recommends that if you're in the area, in the San Jose area, that you protest outside the courthouse on October 12th, like we had planned. But I probably won't be there just because of school and work constraints. So, but I will be traveling and organizing to whatever protest happens in conjunction with X's court hearings. We haven't gotten an actual rescheduled date yet. We haven't heard any of that from his lawyer. We just heard that they are working to reschedule, and they're looking to try and get it done by November 9th. So that's kind of the next date that we should look forward to with regards to hearing any legal news from the whole legal side of the prosecution of Commander X. And we're really hoping that this is a good sign, just because one of the things that the prosecution is going to have to prove is the monetary value of the damages allegedly caused to the city of Santa Cruz or Santa Cruz County by those alleged DDoS attacks. So, but that's very hard. And you also can't prove that Commander X did every one of those attacks. So, legally, there should be some good developments coming forth. That's what we've kind of gauged from hearing from Jay Rory X's lawyer and Commander X himself. But yeah, in the meantime, the hearing on October 12th isn't going to happen. It's being rescheduled. You're still welcome to protest for X anytime. But yeah, we will be having protests in conjunction with his actual court hearing. So whenever the court hearing is rescheduled to happen, we will have a protest outside the courthouse happening at the same time as his hearing, whether it be in person or via Zoom. In the meantime, he's still in Santa Rita jail. So.
And there's, I believe, a petition up on his website right now, as well as multiple different ways to support him. You can buy his books. You can donate to his commissary card. I believe it's at @FreeCommanderX_ is the current Free Commander X account on Twitter. And Glory Jones is one of the committee members for him. So if you would like to help him by purchasing books or have some more direct questions, I'm sure Glory would be more than happy to answer those for you if she hasn't already. But we do have a big crew, so I'm going to go around and let everybody take a moment to introduce themselves. If you could, Al, if you could give a little background about who you are, why you support Julian Assange, and
sure. Just in case, I'm only committed to being here tonight till 9:30. Next time, I'd like to offer more time, so absolutely. I only got 20 minutes. But my name is Alar Suarez. You can find me on Twitter. I'm a supporter of Assange for quite some time now. As a matter of fact, my undergrad was in communications or journalism, and I was going to pursue that into grad school. And part of the reason why I changed my major to history for grad school is because of the so-called mainstream media's coverage or lack of coverage of Assange and just the overall censorship at college papers and things that I went through. Subsequently, I was with Glory in Miami a few months ago and was able to finally meet with Assange's family. John and Gabriel Shipton wrote about it in my blog. It was inspirational seeing them travel from there, their first stop in Miami, to throughout the country to see their bravery and their plight for Assange. But yeah, he's been a hero of mine for some time. He inspired me to go into journalism, and then I was also inspired to leave journalism at the grad school level because of his mistreatment in the media overall.
And I really appreciate you joining us too. We were talking before the show a little bit about the legacy of Kevin Zeese in activism and how he was someone that, for better or worse, because there's some people in the community that don't have the greatest opinion of Kevin, was a very big supporter of Julian's. And it was in leading up to his trials in September, Kevin was working with us to organize a global press event to help educate journalists and activists from around the world about not only why Julian's court case was so important, but the particulars of it. And you're someone that had worked really closely with Kevin. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you guys had done? Because I particularly found the holding of the Venezuelan embassy to be like a really inspirational calling card for anyone fighting for liberty.
Sure. Kevin and I first collaborated in 2010. Shortly upon my return to the United States, I got in touch with Kevin through social media. This is before Popular Resistance existed. Popular Resistance started after Occupy. And then, of course, I met with Kevin, Medea, and other comrades at that time in 2011 when Occupy DC was starting in October of 2011. And, always ran into him and Margaret at the forums that we went through in different parts of the country. And when I heard that they were, under siege and needed help at the Venezuelan embassy in May of 2019, I decided to go with few resources, between classes. I just decided to go. I didn't know where I was going to stay. And every day taking part in actions, trying to deliver food. And Steve Poinkanen at that time was one of the few journalists that interviewed me about my encounters there. And then I decided after that to make a documentary about what happened at the Venezuelan embassy. I had to, kind of cancel that film not too long back. Maybe somebody else will take up the mantle and continue the film, and I could help in some capacity as a producer or whatnot. But Kevin was a big supporter of the film, and unfortunately, he passed away last year. And I didn't hear about that press conference until you mentioned it before the show started. But I did know that Kevin's very last article he was going to write for Popular Resistance, I had written for them in the past as well, was going to be about Assange. Yeah, Assange had an upcoming hearing then in September last year, and he wasn't able to complete that article. I actually brought it up with Dr. Margaret Flowers, his domestic partner, that maybe she could complete the article for him, or they could complete it somehow, put it up on Popular Resistance. I hope they can eventually. But yeah, definitely he was a big time supporter of him. He was a civil rights lawyer, and I like to connect different cases also and show their commonalities, how they're related, such as Steve Donziger. That's a very important case. He was a lawyer that went after Chevron, a hero, and rather than get the Nobel Peace Prize or anything like that, now he's been in house arrest for over 2 years in New York. Because a lot of people say, well, Assange is an Australian. They would never do that to an American. And you're seeing similar things with Donziger now. And then Alex Saab is also an important case. I'm fluent in Spanish. I plan to travel to Venezuela to observe elections next year. Alex Saab is a Venezuelan diplomat, and we made aware Assange's family of his case. He went on a mission to Cape Verde off the coast of Africa to try to facilitate food coming into Venezuela to fight the sanctions. And he was captured under U.S. orders, and he's being tortured. He's being denied his cancer medications. He's been there for over a year. This is what U.S. imperialism is doing. They're making political prisoners out of heroes. They have no respect for international law, just as it was at the Venezuelan embassy. They had no respect for the Vienna Convention. They invaded the embassy illegally and took Kevin, Margaret, Adrian, and David out, the last four of the protectors. And I think that's a part of our history that should be known. I wrote a book about it after Kevin died with Alex Zeese writing the foreword, Kevin's son. But we were never able to finish the film. We weren't able to get the support that we needed, but that doesn't mean that can't be brought up later on. But I think that all of these causes are connected, right? Because you have a lot of activists like, I'm only going to focus on the environment. I'm only going to focus on this. I'm only going to focus on that. It's all related. U.S. imperialism is what's causing a lot of this. And I think we have to unite against that imperialism towards a better society.
Absolutely. So we have with us as well a man who needs no introduction to our audience, David McBride, whistleblower out of Australia, former Australian officer in the Army, turned whistleblower exposing the crimes of the Australian government in conjunction with the U.S. empire in the war in Afghanistan. But I did want to ask David if you had seen or heard anything about the developments from Yahoo News about the CIA's targeting of Julian. And if you wanted to talk about your opinion of that a little bit.
Yeah, g'day, Andrew. I have seen it. As we all expect, as I expected, it didn't really get the mainstream coverage. You got some politicians picked it up. The people who have been helping Julian, a guy called Andrew Wilkie, an independent representative. And so that is good. I think some of the sort of opposition party have also made noise about it, saying we need a response from the US government about this very disturbing development. I think it just helps with the traction. I mean, slowly, these things happen slowly. It's a bit like moving a glacier, but I think more and more people are getting uncomfortable about what's going on. It certainly helps. It helps my case. I think it is very good to be able to say increasingly, because we need to get this sort of middle of the road people, but to say that something is very murky going on here. They're talking about murder, out of control, Mike Pompeo, and whether it went ahead or not doesn't make it any less disturbing. So I'm hoping that the tide is turning. I believe it is in my own case. This is something that we will take up. But it didn't get, as usual, didn't get enough traction. But the people who know, and we only have to get a few people changing sides over the next few months, and there will be a reaction. We may have a general election in Australia, a bit like a presidential election, in the next few months. Certainly in the next 4 months, it has to happen. And there's a good chance there'll be a change of government, and that will be a significant time where there will be a possibility of a change in Australia's attitude towards Julian Assange. So that's some good news, and I'm confident I'm going to win my own case. And if I do, I will then really have a good platform to say we need to now look at Julian Assange's case.
Because if I have this right, I think I remember from one of the last times that we talked that there were some publishers and journalists that had been charged in your case as well. And it was in relation to the ABC News studio raids, and the charges against them had been dropped, as well as a couple other whistleblowers. And then yours was kind of the not that there wasn't other ones, but one of the ones that was still kind of looming. I think that was from like the end of last year-ish. Do you have any updates about any of the other journalists that were being targeted or prosecuted, or anything about potentially like Witness K and those kind of trials that were going on in Australia?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of news. It's interesting that no journalists have had significant charges. Yes, there was the journalists in my case. They weren't even charged, but the charges were definitely hanging over their heads. And a case was prepared against them. And it shows you how hypocritical. I mean, as you all know, one of the frustrations about this is that none of it makes any kind of logical sense. And as has already been said, it is really about US imperialism running information operations. I believe the reason they didn't charge the Australian journalists wasn't because, they like them or they believe in freedom of speech. It was just simply because they were worried about what might happen if they got journalists offside. And so it depends on how powerful you are. Is really the only reason that whether you get charged or not. The Australian government is like a tiny little example of a mini me of the US government, and we just imitate you and in the worst kind of ways, and but that will come back to haunt them. It'll be very hard for them to put me in jail and not the journalists, and not even charge the journalists, because the reason they gave for not charging the journalists was to say, well, the stories were in the public interest. They actually said that. Now, it's going to be very hard for them to say, well, if the stories were in the public interest, the person that gave them the information wasn't acting in the public interest. As I said, I'm increasingly confident that I'm going to win my case. And you never know, because there's all sorts of insider rumours, and they go for the full spectrum. But some say some of the rumours from inside the government say, look, they just want to draw out your case for as long as possible. Perhaps the same as with Assange, in that keeping you on the hooks is a goal in itself, an end in itself, because it discourages anybody else coming forward. So that's why it's important for me to keep a happy face, to keep smiling, because that kind of annoys them in some sort of way. They would like me to be crushed by the steamroller. That's why I'm very grateful to your show. And you're one of the first shows I ever appeared on, and I didn't quite even know who you were when I was first on. I came down, I hadn't shaved, and I was bleary-eyed, and I was like, I'd almost forgotten about it. And but that was really good, because it was the beginnings of being able to smile underneath the attacks, and that annoys the government, to say, I'm not bothered by you, I'm not scared of you. You may think you're just trying to string me out like a cat playing with a mouse, but we are using my case as a platform to speak about Julian Assange. Bernard Collaery, for those of you who don't know, he He's a case which has nothing to do with mine or Assange's, but is everything to do with it, in that he was related to the, and it's probably just about as bad. Well, there's some pretty bad things in the WikiLeaks cables, of course, but this is the Australian government used our equivalent of the CIA, nowhere near as powerful, but obviously the same sort of thing, a secret overseas intelligence service, to bug a foreign nation. And they weren't doing it for the government, they were doing it for allegedly for the benefit of a couple of oil companies. And the terrible thing is they don't even think that that's wrong. And one of the spies was like, we're not meant to be using security services for the benefit of corporations who donate to political parties. And we talk about dystopian, but this is 20 years ago as well, approximately, when that happened. And it's got all the elements of sleaze and hypocrisy, because it was this very, very poor country. It wasn't like the Russians. It was this very poor country who struggles to keep its citizens alive because it doesn't have enough money to pay for decent hospitals. And we were stealing from them. And at the same time, we were holding press conferences saying, we've done so much with this little country, East Timor, It was really creepy, that we are like the villains from Central Casting from a sort of bad movie. We pretend to be humanitarian. At the other time, we're stealing from poor people. Robin Hood in reverse. Anyway, this lawyer got involved in exposing it. Now he's on trial. And of course, the government don't want the story to come out, even though it's common knowledge. So they've put what they call, a bit like Assange's case, national security orders to say that the press can't cover the case and nobody could watch the case. Now, the defendant in that case, Bernard Cleary, has been fighting these security orders. I had them in my case too, because I claimed that if the people knew what really went on in Afghanistan, they're not going to put me in jail. They're going to be putting the generals in jail. But of course, the government wants to shut that down. And just this week in the appeal courts, the secrecy orders for that case about the government bugging, they were overturned by a court of appeal and said, basically to say, while government security is all very well, you can't keep the goings-on of a court case secret from the public if all you're trying to do is just avoid the public finding out.
May I ask a question of him real quick? May I ask a question of him?
Yeah, of course.
Because I have to go in 5 minutes. I'm wondering, is Australia a signatory of the ICC, the International Criminal Court?
They are.
That's interesting, because the United States is not. Huh.
Yeah, I know. And Australia's so funny because we're like the everybody knows something like that. We jump on the bandwagon with every international agreement because we were trying to get on the Security Council for a while, and the 15 out of members, and so we sign up to everything, but then we don't. And we were a founding member of the International Criminal Court, but then we don't really want to be members of it, and so yeah, we're kind of pathetic. We're probably the world's most hypocritical nation.
Yeah, because the Yahoo News story came out, and now there's talk of, did the Australians know? Did they know that there was plans to kill Assange and they went along with it? This is insane. I mean, he's one of their own citizens. He's probably one of the greatest Australians to ever live, in my opinion. And now there's a possibility that the government knew that they had plots against him. Yeah,
I think that's it. We're very much in the American information loop. The Australians, I think there was a suggestion that not only did they know, but they were involved in gathering the information. We're, as I like to say, we're even worse than the US in the sense that we're not even like the school bully of the world, where the school bullies, weak little buddy henchman walks around behind them and we go, yeah.
Good old Five Eyes Network.
Yeah, we've become that guy, and it's appalling.
So, Al, I do appreciate you joining us. We'll have to find time to have you on longer to talk about all the work that you've done, because it's absolutely incredible.
I got 3 minutes. I wanted to put in my 2 cents about Assange and then go. because I know Assange is our main topic here, and I'm a big supporter of his. So basically, if Assange at the end of October is extradited to the United States, it's my opinion that investigative journalism right now is on his deathbed. And that him being extradited here is a guaranteed conviction, which means what? It means that's the death blow. That's the coup de grace. That's it. Investigative journalism, as we know it, is dead. And it's very frustrating trying to convince journalists in the mainstream against their own interests, that they're ignoring the Assange case or not covering it properly. And I'm glad Yahoo News, which is more or less mainstream, was an exception, right? Because that reached more people. But I think we all need to do what we can to prevent this extradition so that Assange can be free. So thank you, friends and comrades, for having me on tonight. And I hope to come on again soon, and then can come on for a longer period of time.
Absolutely. We have Tim Canova coming on in about 2 weeks, so I think that would be fun to have you guys together on the show. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, we can talk about old campaign days.
Right, right. Cool, thank you so much, Al.
See ya.
So I do want to jump over to Joy, because she's been hanging out super patiently, and I apologize.
I love listening. It's okay. I'm used to doing all the talking, so it's all good. Thank you so much for asking me back. I appreciate it. My name is Joy Marie Mann, otherwise known as Savage Joy. I've been doing a show for over 4 years with organizations, and I just went out on my own. Despite losing 85% of my eyesight last year, so I'm still trying to, get acclimated and also keep going with everything I'm passionate about. As far as Assange, to me, I will be 100% transparent. I don't have this I've been an activist my whole life. I don't have that. I mean, Bernard woke me up in 2015, and that's, when I first understood the magnitude of Assange, was 2016, when I was marching and protesting at Occupy DNC, which was at the convention. And I'm getting all these updates of this thing called WikiLeaks. And I'm like, this is freaking fascinating. This is amazing. And they're posting all of these things that, it's so new to me. I was always, yay, Democrats. And all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit, these people are corrupt. And it was now looking back, it's God, you're freaking naive. But that was kind of, he opened my eyes so much. And then I, became fascinated with him, and I just kept researching him more and more, and, just trying to combat, all of these things. People still don't understand, and I think a lot of it's cognitive dissonance, a lot of it's ignorance. They think he is in prison because he hacked Hillary's emails. They don't understand. And this has nothing to do about Queen Hillary, and he's not a hacker. They're trying to deflect from the service he's provided so much of us. And if any other publication can say that they have 100% consistency, bring it on, because I've never seen anything even close to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to drop a question over to David real quick, and this kind of relates to the work that Magnus does, because he's involved in literally everything.
A little bit.
But so you, David, had revealed that the Australian government was using was using the war in Afghanistan to essentially bolster political campaigns of people in Australia. And I was just wondering, in the world that we live in, do you think with the general election coming up and all of the craziness in the Australian streets, that there have been any uses of the media apparatus and coronavirus to bolster the political campaigns for all these politicians? Because we have a lot of people falling in New South Wales because of the corruption bureaus that are going on there. Gladys Berejiklian and a couple other people have been forced to resign amidst corruption from taking money from pharmaceutical companies. So I was just wondering if you had thought about the connections between what you had revealed and the process that the government was going through to use the military to bolster political campaigns to something similar to what may be happening with COVID, where they use these death numbers to get people riled up to try to win elections.
Yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head. That's happening very much, and this is one of the things that I've been fighting against. War is popular. War wins votes. That was the real reason. It's hard to get it across to the average person. You guys and your listeners will get it, but the war in Afghanistan was kept on going because it won votes. You know, the more people committed, the more bombs people dropped, the more politicians, the more popular they became. Now that and I think this was the sort of pivot to Asia. Now we're gearing up for a war with China, and whether it actually kicks off into a war, it doesn't really matter. Being on a war footing wins votes. Looking presidential, not with everybody, of course. There are people like us who see through it, but unfortunately, it's a very successful technique in Australia to get re-elected, is to look like you're protecting the country by taking on some other country.
I'm assuming the big naval deal that our country just did with Australia is probably a big part of that. The carrier deal or whatever it was. Exactly.
They pulled that out of the bag, and sure enough, it was the Murdoch newspapers and whatever ran it up like it was a big victory. Because yes, the French subs deal was very unpopular. People realised it was costing us a lot of money to do nothing. The subs weren't going to arrive for 30 years or something, and they were costing all the money Australia had, pretty much. But that, yes, as I called it, I wrote about it to say it was the Trojan subs. It looked like we were getting kind of free subs or discount subs from the US, but what it really meant was that we were effectively now, we kind of already were, but we were, if there was any doubt, we are really just now part of the US military. And that means if they go to war, we go to war. In fact, there's no longer any they and us. We are all going to go to war together whenever the US tells us to. And that's the sub. But yeah, but the terrible thing is that was kind of popular. The Prime Minister here is kind of on the way out. He suffered a lot of blows over COVID because despite, as Andrew said, they talk up, they all got more popular. Anyone in power in Australia, because we have various different states, the more draconian the leaders were, the more popular they got. The sort of people who go out there and panic buy toilet paper. We have them a lot. We have a lot in Australia. They love tough leaders. They love tough. You know, I reckon because it's that old thing. If you've got 50% of the population with you, you can kind of do anything, and the other 30%, whatever. I reckon they probably would have got away with burning people who had COVID. You know, and people they would have got more popular. You know, the 50% would have been like, that's fantastic. That's leadership. That's tough leadership. You know, we've got to actually, put them in concentration camps and kill them. And unfortunately, it's become like that in Australia, where you can be incredibly cruel and inhumane and not follow the law, but you will get at least 40% of the population going, that's fantastic. That's leadership.
Yeah, I have to avoid the threads about the riots in Australia because it hurts my hope for humanity of people literally begging riot cops to beat up and shoot people and getting really excited about it. And so.
Oh, I know. I saw a very good tweet by someone I don't even agree with, and he said, if you're cheering riot cops on while they beat up, and shoot rubber bullets into peaceful protesters that are sort of exercising their right to protest, you are a fascist, and it was kind of funny because the so-called, more or less the progressives in Australia were cheering the riot cops on and saying basically, you know, how dare these people protest, you know,
It's
fucking
the
running
same thing here, David.
and,
And
and it's like, wow. No, and if you have one of those opinions, you just about get your house burnt down, you know, by progressives with pitchforks. You are not allowed to have an opinion which is not, you know, part of the propaganda, you know, and that's quite worrying. I don't even, in fact, you know, I'd take it on the government. I've stolen documents from the government. I'm risking life in prison, but it's so touchy in Australia. I don't even go there because there is such a sort of lynch mob about anybody who doesn't have the sort of rubber stamped progressive sort of ideas that you'll just get steamrolled.
When you said progressives with pitchforks, I pictured people with 3 masks on, like 4 syringe hanging out of their arms, sitting on their couch with a pitchfork.
No, it's right, and it's
that was
the lockdowns, like with the measures that the riot police are taking in Australia, that really gives you a further glimpse into how interconnected like the US and Australia are again, because you see how the surveillance apparatus as well as like the techniques that the riot cops use and the technology that they use is very similar to what we have to deal with in the US. So like what's happening in Australia has happened in the US, and it's very much going to come here even more. And like that's where I think your vindication, David McBride, would be so important, because like once like a win for you would be a win for all of us, honestly.
I think that conversation. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. No, I agree, and I think that's why it's so important. And I think the enemy kind of know that as well. Because I want to take on all these issues and to say, but you're right. It's probably the one area we're leading America in, and it's all bad because it's the police state. While they might not admit it, it's got majority support. You know, there's not much, and it's done. We're the most hypocritical nation in the world because they teach you sort of European 20th century history, and we think we're so superior to the sort of Germans in the 1930s. No one has any clue that we are going down the same road, that we sort of stand on our pillar of hobby horse and think we are so superior to countries that became totalitarian states. We are doing exactly the same thing, and everybody kind of thinks that they're right. But if you, it's extreme force against anybody, and who doesn't toe the party line.
I have a question for you, David. It's kind of relevant to that point. Is here in the U.S., we're seeing a massive, rapid expansion of police budgets across the entire country, and that's setting alarm bells off in our head. Was the Australian police, in the version it is now, have they been expanded to this point, or is this like consistent? Because obviously I don't know too much about how it works over there. Are they kind of ramping up their local police state, or did they already just unleash what they had?
Yeah, it's a good question, and unfortunately no one pays enough attention to it. The public are a little bit sort of blind to it. I think the budget is actually unlimited. It would probably, in the same way as the sort of information operation budget is unlimited, and it just comes from some. There's probably some sort of magical funnel, where it's sort of it's classified as national security or something like that. But yeah, I've never seen there being any limits on there's. That's one of the reasons why they're able to harass me, because once you're classified, and this is a scary thing the average person doesn't get, once you're classified not as a criminal but as a national security threat, they can do all sorts of things to you that they couldn't do to you if you're just a suspected criminal. And so I'm classified as a national security threat, as is the other guy, and all the rioters would be. They'd be classified as rioters, protesters. They'd be classified as right-wing extremists, supergroups or something, and therefore you'd get a huge budget for. Yeah, you wouldn't if you went to the, the sort of the supply chain and said we need, more riot shields, more tanks. I think they've even bought tanks out, helicopters. They just give it to you. They'd say, of course, our country's under threat from these terrible, violent extremists.
Well, here in the U.S., the FBI has officially announced that they'll be using anti-terror laws against people going to school board meetings to talk about masks and mandates.
The real important thing with that, too, is something I never saw before the BLM protests last year, and they've been expanding in their use of it, is if they not officially label you as a domestic terrorist, but essentially label you as a domestic terrorist, they can withhold bail. And especially under COVID, you have a lot of BLM activists, anti-fascist activists, even like right-wing militia dudes, the whole political spectrum, being held for 6 months to a year with no trial because I think the exact wording is they are too dangerous to be released to the public until trial. And it's like, that's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, you saw that famous case went around the world where they went and the cops went to the pregnant mum's house who dared to share something on Facebook about one of these meetings, and they cuffed her and took her off for sharing a Facebook message, And
well, here in the U.S., we had the Capitol Police contact a local law enforcement branch because someone showed that Ocasio-Cortez had walked back her support of the Palestinians, posted
and Daniel Baker in Tallahassee, Florida, made a Facebook post about going to counter protest the next January 6th event that was being planned that never happened. But he was planning to counter protest that, and he posted about that on Facebook. And based on that charge alone, he was arrested on a pre-crime charge, which is amazing. Just wonderful.
He got 5 years. He was actually sentenced 5 years in prison for inciting a riot at a riot that never happened, for a protest that never happened, over posting a flyer to Facebook. 5 years in prison.
No, we've got that. That phrase touched a nerve. Pre-crime. We've got that classification now too, which would have been a joke 20 years ago, but now, they can classify you as a potential future criminal. Put you in jail, and there's no adult supervision for any of this. There's no one saying, that's just someone with a different view to the government. They're pre-criminal. All these things that were made for sort of violent, really dangerous people after 2001 are being used against people who have different views to the government. It's really quite scary.
Can I pose a question? Especially for Mr. McBride being in the actual, situation, dealing with, a court case and everything. I'm curious because something I really don't hear people talk about it, and I know it's very daunting and we don't like to talk about it, but something I'm really curious to have your takes on is, let's say Julian is sent to the United States. How do we protect him? Because hell yes, we want him out. Yes. Then what?
I'm a dissenter on this, I have to say, and I get some hate over it. But this is at least no one can say, well, it's easy for you to say. I mean, because I am prepared to go to prison. And I think it may be the only way that we get real action, because I'm putting a middle-class guy who used to be in the military in prison when so much of what I've been saying has been proved correct. That's going to sit uncomfortably with people. As long as Julian doesn't die, and of course that's a big possibility, I don't think it's the end of the world if he does go to prison. I think Nelson Mandela went to prison 28 years, and he came out and he became president within like a year. Gandhi went to prison. You know, people can go to prison and their power gets stronger if they've been put in prison unjustly, and if the regime can fall. I think there will be very good legal grounds. I know that the court case he will face will be very much stacked against him, and he will probably be convicted. But there will be grounds for appeals to the Supreme Court, and I think that the zeitgeist is changing. Of course, he needs to stay alive, and he's got a lot of inside information about whether or not he'd be killed in prison. But I think he might win more by going to prison, because at the moment, even if he escapes extradition, unfortunately, the ruling is that WikiLeaks is illegal, basically, and anything like it is illegal, and you will be sent to a US prison, and he might get off under the grounds of his own particular mental health, but that anyone else that tries to emulate him in years to come still faces forever in a US prison. Now, we need to overturn that. And that can only be done by somebody actually facing the charges in the US. It can't be done in the British court. And that's why I want to go to court, and that's why I maybe need to go to prison, because the only way to sort of kill this dragon is to actually take it on and expressly. And so while it will be hard for him, for the greater cause, it's not necessarily the end of the world. It may mean that he comes out of a US prison, because I don't really need to keep him in there very long. I need to get a conviction. Like a lot of people that went to Guantanamo Bay. We had an Australian guy who was actually in the Taliban. They put him in Guantanamo Bay. It was a show trial, but they let him out 6 months later. And so, yeah, there is still hope. Don't give up hope, and we just need to make the noise even louder if that happens. The extradition trial is not the be and end all. And as I say, I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is, that I'm probably one of the few people that can say that, because I am facing prison. I'm prepared to go to prison, and I can see that may be the only way I'm really going to win this war. If they drop the charges, what have I got? I've lost my platform. I haven't really damaged the government monster. And I might be able to kind of write a book, but to beat this monster, we really have to take it on in a battle and not let it slink off into the bushes.
Yeah, I definitely understand that perspective, just because the way the decision stands right now, like you said, David, the door is very much open for something like this to happen again to another journalist. I mean, the only reason why extradition was denied against Julian was because of the fact that, because of his mental health state, it was decided that he basically wouldn't survive in the US prison system as it stands right now. So if someone who wasn't in Julian's current mental state, didn't share the exact same issues, was to do exactly what Julian did, they would get arrested and extradited probably on the exact same espionage charges. So I do think we need to face that head on for press freedom, for journalism. And I get the one benefit I see of Julian coming here is the fact that it would really light a fire under us, at least. Just because I don't want to say what I would do, because I'm not trying to get arrested on pre-crime charges. But
things would get very interesting if Assange ever stepped foot on U.S. soil. We can just say that.
Yeah.
One of the ideas we floated as for direct nonviolent action is the court trial would take place in the Eastern District of Virginia. That is a defined border territory, a place that exists. And we were going to go door to door and pass out information about jury nullification. That was one of the ideas that we had started floating around internally. Because in the U.S. you have 3 jury entries, and this would be a jury trial, at least from the way everything's supposed to work. Which you have in the U.S. guilty, not guilty, that a jury can decide. And then there's the jury nullification, which is essentially a jury pleading no contest, saying like, yes, these charges are true, like he did the things you're accusing him of, but that's not actually a crime. He shouldn't be committed of that. This should just be thrown out. So that was one of the ideas that we had floated doing back either in January or September of last year, is starting a jury nullification campaign out in the Eastern District.
I guess like another possible positive to it is a lot of people I talk to that are they're aware of the Assange case, but they're not activists or they're not, as informed. They kind of view it as some distant thing, like he's sitting in Belmarsh, there's nothing we can do, like, so they kind of detach themselves from it. Where if they actually put on a trial in the United States, like, that would get news coverage, and everyone involved would be U.S. actors and people with that operate in the public space. If you kind of get what I'm getting at, people that could be protested, people that could be booed as they go into the courthouse, kind of thing, and that might change kind of people's perspective. Because I asked a lot of people in more of the kind of right-wing community of why they don't talk about Assange so much anymore. And that was kind of their excuse for it, was, it's something happening over there. It's depressing. There's nothing we could do. Yeah. And that might change if it becomes a U.S. issue.
Yeah. And since the extradition ruling, a lot of people just lost track of the case flat out, because it was like the extradition ruling happened and it was like there was a thing of like, oh good, no extradition, we had nothing to worry about, and then like people kind of just like forgot about it. Obviously that wasn't everyone.
Well, they had to stage a political insurrection. Like they had to put on a whole ass false flag on January 6th just to bury the headline about bail being denied to Julian.
People lost track of it, and this is something that I've gauged from talking to people on the ground. Like just at the last I was covering a protest in Beverly Hills in support of firefighters that were at risk of losing their job because they refused to comply with the mandate. So at that protest, I actually met a lot, because I was wearing a Free Julian Assange shirt, and I met a lot of people that were Julian Assange supporters. But what happened was they flat out said, like, yo, what's happening with Julian? We lost track of him. And part of that is because of how, like, the U.S. and UK and Vanessa Baraitser and the entire prosecution just, like, so, like, deviously plotted this thing to basically bring the case to kind of a lull. And, that's not to say that Julian's not receiving a lot of active support still, because Team London is fire. People in Australia are fire. We got our little group here going that's like doing stuff and doing things for him. But it's like a lot of people who were kind of, very supportive of Julian and would go to actions occasionally, kind of lost track of the case because of the lull that happened due to the fact that extradition was denied, but the case is still very much going on with the appeal by the Department of Justice. So, yeah.
So do you guys think that having 12 jurors would be advantageous rather than just a judge? I think it might be, but I'm interested to hear your take. So
John Kiriakou explained how the process in the Eastern District of Virginia works with jury trials, because they generally all are jury trials. But what they do is, because it deals with classified information, they change words. So instead of saying, like, we'll just use Abu Ghraib as an example and the torture that was happening there. Instead of referring to it as Abu Ghraib, they would say, even if the documents were able to be brought up, that Julian had revealed that the prison in Buttercup City was being used to, I don't know, insert random verb. Like, they literally change words into like nonsensical pieces because of how sensitive it is. So it gives this whole illusion, even if it is a real non-biased jury, of being of a higher level of importance because they can't even know all of the words that are
and
used.
to speak to that non-biased point too, though, because it's taking place in the Eastern District of Virginia, there's a very high chance that your non-biased jury is going to be full of spooks.
Yeah. 10 feds for every 14. That's the rule, right?
Well, yeah, that's literally where, like, the George W. Bush CIA building, right, is right there. The Alexandria Detention Center that Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond were held in is in that Eastern District of Virginia. It's that jail that they use. So Julian, even if he gets sent here as a pretrial detainee, he'll be held in that exact same prison.
Wow.
Oh, joy.
And U.S. prison conditions, U.S. jail conditions. That's the one thing about Julian coming here is I don't want him to have to face that because no one should have to face that, quite frankly. I mean, it's really bad here. Just in helping out a lot with the Commander X case, one of the things that he's been adamant about is kind of exposing the conditions that people in jails and in prison are subject to. And he was just talking about Santa Rita Jail in California because that's where he's currently being held. That doesn't even begin to touch the surface of like U.S. prisons or special administrative measures or any of that. Besides, going past all the arts and crafts and colored TV bullshit that they try to peddle out because,
I interviewed a gentleman from prison on my show, Temujin Kensu. He was found innocent, and over 10 years ago, he's been in prison for 33 years. Found innocent over a decade ago. His case is still sitting on Gretchen Whitmer's desk. He has a brain tumor. He has pancreatic cancer. He had COVID, like you name it. I mean, this guy is in bad freaking shape, receives no medical treatment. Like, to go through what I went through to even have that interview with him was insane. And this is a man who was found innocent over 10 years ago, who is still in there. And he tells me some of this shit, and it's absolutely repulsive. But that's the importance of what we all do with independent media, because this shit needs to be exposed. I absolutely feel your concern as far as Julian, but we don't know what his situation is like over there either. I mean, it's
Belmarsh ain't pretty either. I don't think, one thing that Belmarsh did, which was particularly annoying, was they literally held Julian's winter clothes hostage throughout the entire winter. I mean, he was having to keep himself warm by wearing layers and insulating his cell with books and stuff. So it's and every time we would call, because we would call and we would message and we would be like, hey, give Julian inmate number, his winter clothes, please. And they'd say, oh, no, sorry, we can't. They're in storage. And then a bunch of other procedural nonsense that you'd have to go through. And then I'm pretty sure they won't allow him access to a lot of the letters that we've been writing him. So, yeah. And also the fact that it's referred to as the Guantanamo Bay of London, or the Guantanamo Bay of England. So, it's not
when he first got moved into Belmarsh, they tried to put him in the medical wing of the prison, and there have been reports that have come out about Belmarsh basically using the medical wing as a enhanced torture facility. And during that time, Julian was taken to court, and he couldn't remember his name or date of birth. In courtroom, articles written about it and it recorded, to the point that this Belmarsh prison, the prisoners inside there, which are hard, people that you would actually consider a terrorist and things like that, organized to get Julian out of medical isolation. That's how he got out of medical isolation, was the inmates in Belmarsh prison had to be no, we know what that is and we know who he is. He's not supposed to be here. And that was it actually came up in court. Not that exact story, but the circumstance and situation about potentially finding like razor blades in Julian's cells, and how they were trying, the court itself was openly omitting information about his psychological condition, while at the same time now attacking the people that have worked with Julian on the medical aspect of it for years now. Actually going in, like Niels Melzer, for example, his testimony basically was ruled out as like hearsay and political talk, when he specifically had talked about the use of psychological torture in the independent examination. And they're going after Professor Kopelman's testimony, or at least attempting to, saying that not even arguing about what he said, if it was right or wrong, but just saying that it shouldn't have been entered into court because he protected sources, protected Julian's fiance and children. Because at the time, which we now know even more so from the Yahoo News case, the CIA was going after him through UC Global and his family. It's called CIA versus WikiLeaks. It's an associate of Julian's that was visiting him regularly from the Wuhan Institute, that outlines the personal attacks and surveillance that were happening against him, to the point that he had home invasions, that he found a second board installed, like a second motherboard installed in his phone that only responded to outgoing calls and incoming calls, that all it did was send that information. So at some point, this person literally had someone break into their house or their work and install a secondary motherboard inside of this guy's phone. So the Professor Kopelman withholding Stella Morris's name, which the court knew and could have put into perspective with Kopelman's testimony, it just gets omitted. And like hopefully the Yahoo News article itself was enough to put what was happening in a large enough context that the British court will be forced to not ignore that.
Yeah, I think just the details and the fact that the U.S. government was actively trying to kill somebody in your custody would be more concerning to the English government. But I mean, we all know what we're working with here. So
I mean, it's the CIA. It's like when I heard that, I was like, yeah, like, listen, I'm always happy to get a legit whistleblower, or Julian Assange in the trends, because I'll work that shit like Allen Iverson coming off a double screen or some shit. But I mean, like, for real, it's not really news. I mean, we know from testimonies of people like David, and also testimonies of other whistleblowers, how much these people get targeted and harassed and tortured, really. I mean, especially with Julian, we have decades of information going back to the initial targeting of WikiLeaks via the HB Gary and Palantir PowerPoint, and then also the initial UC Global investigation, which came out a year ago, that linked them to the CIA as well. So, I mean, at that point, like, when you consider how much Julian was targeted, it's like, it's already kind of inferred, honestly. I mean, the CIA isn't past that. They floated assassinating their own citizens, and that's not even coming on, like, that's not even beginning to go into like what really happened to JFK land. That's me taking from my own research of looking into CIA memos regarding the targeting of Malcolm X, when the then director of operations, Richard Helms, said that he was hesitant to take actions to assassinate American citizens, but he would look into neutralizing Malcolm X while he was in Africa. And then conveniently around that same time, there was a poisoning attempt against him made in a hotel in Cairo, Egypt. So, and there's also various other instances similar to that form this pattern where you come to expect this kind of behavior from the CIA. So it's good to have that news in the news, but it shouldn't surprise those of us who have been looking at this case and following this kind of news. But yeah, I'm always happy to get Assange in the news, though, because he really needs the exposure.
And kind of what Joy sort of touched on, and I know it's like way off in the future and it might not ever happen, but I do think it's something people should consider, that if we do get Assange free, he's going to essentially have to find a way to have a team of people around him at all times, because they will try to kill that man, no matter where he goes, no matter what he's doing, and they will go to extreme lengths to pull it off. And that's like, even getting him free is not the end of the fight. That's how serious kind of this all is.
Well, not to be the conspiracy guy in the room, right? But but here in the U.S., and you can actually look at the news reporting at the time. It wasn't until after Julian's February-March 2020 trial that coronavirus became what it was in the United States media. And to me, just in my conspiracy mind, right, it is essentially through Julian's trial, they proved that they have essentially total media hegemony here in the United States. That there wasn't any media institution that was willing to step up to challenge the intelligence and for-profit state. And then that's when coronavirus was able to explode and move forward thereafter, at least in the media. And maybe the two aren't connected, like maybe I'm seeing a duck where there's really a sheep, but to me, just living in the world that I do, going from seeing no media coverage about Julian's trial and then driving home and having the media hysteria about COVID immediately start thereafter that weekend, it was just really, like, I don't know, like it was almost like this weird, like, wow, that's fucking horrifying. It was like they were like beta testing their media hegemony, proved that they had it, and then ran.
Right, that's definitely something, like, if he does get extradited and he comes here, that's something we have to make sure they cannot, allowed to slip onto the news. We're gonna have to be the most annoying people in the world on Twitter to make sure that gets talked about, because they'll do it too. Like I've heard people say, like, oh, if they bring him, if he actually goes to trial in the U.S., like that'll never, stay out of the headlines. And I'm like, you'd be surprised.
Oh no, it will. It will. But I mean, I'm here.
Yeah, let's say we literally had a coup in Guinea, and literally nobody outside of Twitter fucking talked about it. So
I mean, like literally, probably maybe half of my DMs right now are filled with people complaining about my spams that I just ignore because I don't care. I'll become a proper menace if Julian gets extradited.
If you ever start your own show, that has to be its name, Proper Menace.
I love it.
Well, and I digress a little, but just a few months ago when I forget how to say her name, but Ghislaine Maxwell was taken in finally after decades of all of us knowing who she is. The next freaking day, Matt Getz story comes out, and they admit they're following him and investigating him for a year, but it comes out the day after. And why is that? Epstein's connected to Clinton and Trump and all these people, so it's like the next day you've been looking into him for a year, and the next day Matt Getz is all over everything. He's a Republican, all this stuff, and it's like
that ruled the headlines for like a month. Like,
yeah, even I noticed that in Australia, and I do agree with you. I think it's about the blanket media coverage. That's one thing I have noticed through COVID too. How much whoever it is that pulls the levers does have incredible powers to blanket. 80% of the stories will be the same, and we saw it Epstein. Epstein was interesting. I mean, there was that was in the news for one day, and then no one covered Epstein's death.
The memes were more popular than the actual news.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And there was a little bit of humor about it, but no one actually seriously looked into whether he was murdered, and anybody that did was shouted down. And we saw that in a smaller way in Australia, but still quite disturbing. When they had in January 2020, we had a very bad bushfire season in Australia.
I remember.
And half of Australia burned down, and there were all these stories in the not just in the Murdoch newspaper, but came out saying it was arsonists. It wasn't global warming. It was arsonists, a plague of arsonists, and it got coverage. And it wasn't until there was an inquiry who looked into it, and 2 years later it came down the track and saying that it wasn't a plague of arsonists. But that was all the major media channels ran it and said, we're investigating this mysterious arsonist who are lighting the fires all over Australia.
Yeah, they did the same thing in the U.S. Northwest when we had our wildfires. They tried to blame it on BLM protesters. They got people so riled up that they were pulling guns on journalists because they thought they were protesters.
And even if they, renege what they've said, the seed's been planted. It doesn't matter. People are going to run with it. You can say whatever you want. The people itself, like, I remember in 2016 when that so-called reporter was saying that we were throwing chairs at the Bernie meeting, and then it came out he was lying, and the New York Times hired him. So it's like, it doesn't matter. People still go with that, even if it's proven false. So
I've noticed that. People want it. They don't really read the news or listen. They just look for things that confirm what they already think.
Absolutely.
I noticed that. I noticed the Murdoch newspapers did this. They picked up a story, as they sometimes do, and they picked up a story from another line. It might have been what, and it talked about the US government being caught out tapping Angela Merkel's phone, and the French president at the time wasn't Macron. It was before Macron's time. Hollande, maybe.
Holland.
Yeah, and it was critical. It was a critical article saying, this is the French and the Germans have complained about this. They don't appreciate being spied on by their own allies. And all the comments in the papers were like, fucking don't trust the Germans. The Germans are really bad. And they, even though the article was sort of like critical of this action, all the readers were like, all the readers went the other way. They were like, yeah, we should be tapping the French phones. We should be and nobody drew the connection that the reason they were doing it was to blackmail them into doing things they didn't want to do. And people, I think that this is when I'm writing my own book, because psychology is so important in all of these things, as you guys know, and the way trying to change people's opinions about Assange is very hard. And the world has become very polarized, and you're either on our team or the opposite team. And as you said in your example, no reasonable argument can make, or very rarely can you make someone change your team. That's why I liked hearing your story, that you did kind of change team as a result of, as I did, as a result of what you saw. You were obviously a good person rather than a dogmatic person, and you saw something which was against everything we were meant to be believing in, and you realised things were not what they seem. But that's rare. It's hard to because people don't like Assange, and you could say anything you want that it's not going to change. Well, hopefully we can begin to slowly change it. And you look back on the Vietnam War. It just takes a long time. Most of the mainstream people in Australia supported the Vietnam War. The people who protested against it were considered lunatics and crazy sort of hippies, and now that's all changed. But it's taken a while, and they can't see the analogy. They can't see the analogy between the Afghanistan war and the Vietnam War, and they can't see that it's exactly the same. And it's the dissidents who are the heroes, not those who sort of like chanting along with the government. But you're right, there is a stranglehold of the establishment media, but hopefully, slowly, surely, at least the good news is once you have a crack in the damn wall, and once you get that quantum mass, it's not impossible to turn it around, I think, and it suddenly will flip. We've got it's sort of like 50% for 30%. But if we can get 45-45, and then 46-45, who knows? We've certainly had a lot of good progress with Julian Assange. Stella Morris, his partner, I think has been a very good advertisement for him and the children. And I think, in order to get that kind of mainstream, or more mainstream people across, I think there is hope. And the trial, as you said, if you guys go crazy in America, if I ever get released, get my passport back, I'll be over there to help.
You just got to be careful because there's a lot of Australians that can't get back in the country right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they allow you to leave,
It might stop me through COVID passports or something. But yeah, I don't know. There's things
that would be exciting though to have you join us here in the U.S. That would be incredible.
I had a friend in West Australia that went through hell trying to get to Canada for a work trip, and he had to go through so many hoops, and he was totally vaccinated and everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of hoops. It's really hard. And they send people back from the airport if you don't have all your papers in order. And it's pretty funny. And yeah, we are a police state, there's no doubt about it. And yet people don't know. They keep taking the medication. They don't realise that. And there's a few people that try to point it out, but they're the ones that are ostracised. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about? I don't know if you know about what's actually going on, but I believe it's called the IBAC in New South Wales. It's the anti-corruption unit that deposed Gladys Berejiklian and one of the other. I don't even know much about your political system, so I can't pretend like I do, but like one of the deputy PMs. Do you know about that corruption investigation at all?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. They didn't actually, they didn't get rid of her. Well, they did, tangentially. She resigned because she knew the writing was on the wall. And as far as gamesmanship goes, they played it pretty well because, and this is what I'm saying, that there is the toilet paper hoarders really kind of support it. And as not only she resigned, and she was like, how dare these anti-corruption fighters look into me? And she managed to paint them as the bad guys. And a lot of people have sent her flowers. It's pretty funny, that she was like the victim. All she was just a little bit corrupt.
A little bit corrupt.
We should be a bit more open-minded,
Or a little tyrant.
I know. And because we don't have a federal anti-corruption body, and they're fighting against it, and it's kind of just so dystopian. The Prime Minister came out and said, well, this is why we don't have a federal corruption body. Look, they're targeting like this little old lady. And unfortunately, a lot of people buy it. The toilet paper hoarders buy it, and it's pretty terrible. But hopefully, because they're pretty scared of a corruption body, and they're non-partisan. They're pretty good, and they take a lot of scalps because our political class, whether they're red or whether they're blue, they're rotten to the core. And anyone that gets looked into is kind of gone because they've all got so many. But she's a study in gamesmanship because she had this affair with this crooked guy who was as crooked as sort of a property developer, and she managed to paint it. When she was caught out, she was having this affair with him for 5 years, and he's I don't know whether he's in jail or just about in jail. So he was a proper criminal guy. And she has managed to say, oh, I was just unlucky in love, And, the mainstream sort of boarded her. They kind of, after that, she could be as corrupt as she wanted because she created this narrative where, oh, I loved a bad man kind of thing. And that was the narrative, that was the story, and that was unbreakable. She could have killed someone after that, and everyone was like, "Oh, she loved a bad man," and so it was actually quite a good way get around it. And if you get the narrative right, you can get away with anything with this crowd. And it's, but saying that, the good news is she's gone, and it is a scalp. And even though the mainstream media are peddling hard to put that up there, there's that hard 30% people who know that she was corrupt and she had to go because she was corrupt. And so it was a pretty good week. She may end up back in politics because she's managed to survive, so who knows. But yeah, it was it was a scalp. And if they ever do get a federal body, that's a bit like the Democrats and the Republicans in the US. There's really not much difference between the two parties. They both take the same donations from the same corporations. But there is the one major difference is the sort of the Labor Party, the sort of slightly left-wing party. They say they will put in an IBAC corruption body for the federal parliament. And if they do, that will be a big step in the right direction, because you just need a couple of scalps and the rest will fall in line, and that's so it'll be a big help to me, because at the root of all my things, I've said that, the war was run for profit. All the stories were lies. They were lies. It was a bit like the army had become a huge advertising agency for the government, and truth didn't matter. And that's the sort of stuff that will come out in, all the equipment we bought was bought as a result of bribes. We covered up war criminals because they were sort of heroes, and for the government, they were good ads for the government. We become like a sort of Enron, a corrupt, bad corporation, pretending to be a government. And so if we do get a federal corruption body, it will finally give a venue for a lot of my claims to be tested. That's one of the reasons why I want to go to court. And that's one of the reasons it will help Julian if it happens, because you can finally, as a defendant, you can finally say, the reason I was a whistleblower was because I saw crime. And I know in your court system for the Espionage Act, they don't have to look into that. But that's one of the things you could take to the Supreme Court. But in Australia, they do have to look into it. And they say, well, okay, tell us, what crime did you see? And I have the ability to say, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. And then it's going to make them hard for me to put me in jail. The government wants to argue to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter what crime you see, you still go to jail, as you do under the Espionage Act. I think our highest court system will say that that's why the secrecy ruling recently is very important. I think they will say that's wrong. If you witness the Holocaust and you might be in the German army, you're allowed to say, enough, I'm going to leak this. And that's the strong claim I'm going to say. And the very good offshoot is they have to look into my claims. They have to look into the alleged crimes of the government, and that will expose them. And then they might have to take it to an anti-corruption body. It won't be like a few good men when they're going to arrest the witnesses trying to prosecute me, but it might effectively be like that when they see, because it's almost like a zero-sum game, my case. If I don't get convicted after admitting that I gave the documents to the press, it's a necessary finding that there was crime by the government, because that's the only defence I've got. And if I'm successful, that will really mean there must have been significant crime by the government, because it justified what I did. And that's why I've avoided running any kind of mental health defence. I don't want to give them a get out of jail free card to say, oh, well, he's just a sick man, we won't put him in jail. I want them to have to decide who was the biggest criminal, me or the government. And it's a kind of a high-risk strategy, but the atmospherics are changing day by day, and I think, we're going to win. As I said, if we don't do it, we will never be able to hold them to account. So, but I'm so grateful. It's not an easy road, and that's why I'm so grateful to you guys, because you really get it. And even though I've got supporters out here, they don't really understand how bad things have got. It's too much for them, and sometimes it's a bit like in Stranger Things or something. You kind of have to focus on a story they're going to believe rather than the real story. Because
our world is so dark that I literally made a new friend on Twitter because he was going through FOIA documents about the Fauci's Department of Health trafficking fetal organs. Like aborted fetus organs were being trafficked through the state of Pennsylvania with racial bias efforts. Like they were trying to target mostly African American communities with this, and they went as far as to refer to some as like elected and then other as spontaneous, which like I don't know the definition of that, but if there's a racial bias and you're spontaneously aborting children to sell their organs and then trying to get people to talk about it on the internet was a crazy thing. So you are amongst a community of people that understand how really dark the world can be.
Yeah, it's white water in the desert for me, because you guys actually know and you get it. You're savvy, you've got connections, and you know that it's pretty bad. I try not to get too down about it. That's why another reason why I enjoy your show. We have plenty of laughter, because it's if you take it all on board, it's too depressing. But yeah, no, things are pretty bad.
That's why I say you can laugh or you can cry, so I choose to laugh.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remain optimistic just being an activist, but like sometimes it does stun me, the pure number of like bootlickers that fall for these war criminal rehabilitation efforts by the establishment media, because I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I was in Beverly Hills for at the Saban Theater because one George H.W. Bush was coming to speak at a distinguished speaker series, and that was when that video of Mike Preissner yelling at George Bush went viral, because there was also a group of us outside and there were people like lining up to hear George H.W. Bush speak. And so like we're there heckling the living shit out of them for this, because it's like 20 years, 21 years. No, my bad. I'm getting my years messed up. But like, because I rounded up to 20 years. 20 years after the Iraq War now. And y'all are lining up to hear a war criminal speak. What's up with that?
But Malala was there with him.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Another CIA tool was there. Oh no. But yeah.
No, I was like, okay, now I gotta.
We gave them hell for that, and there were people pissed. I really liked her. Yeah, we gave them hell for that, and there were people pissed at us. At one point, like I yelled "Free Daniel Hale" really loud, and I had like a megaphone with me, and then like a lady that was like 5 meters away was like, "Our ears are right here," so I was like, "Oh, sorry, there's just a war criminal inside there."
It just goes to show your
you want to know the fucked up part too? Like I went out to the street for a second to yell more about whistleblowers that need to be freed for exposing the Iraq and Afghan war. So I was like, free so-and-so, free so-and-so, free so-and-so. And then I came back towards like the theater entrance. And then as I'm walking back, this one lady is like, how old are you? And I'm like, I'm 21. And she's like, oh, you weren't even alive then, so it doesn't matter. I'm like, wait a minute. So there's been a war that's been taking place for the duration of my life. And like, I'm not grown, but I'm grown here. And you're mad at me for protesting that. It's like bootlickers. I can't believe it sometimes.
Like the important detail of that too is this is Beverly Hills. Like there was a time not that long ago where that man's car would have been hated pulling into that community. And now it's okay. Now he's been rehabilitated. Now he's Team B or something.
Yeah, put it this way. On the bright side, there was a reason why they had to run to hold that event in Beverly Hills instead of South Central LA. So that's the one thing.
Silver linings.
So yeah.
But
did you guys know he paints?
I want someone to make a picture of George Bush's face on Bob Ross's body, and like have the Iraq War covered in bushes and sticks or some shit. Like,
look, Michelle Obama gives him candy. He's adorable.
And Barack Obama has a really nice in and out move when he's playing basketball. That don't change the fact that 90% of the drone strikes he ordered didn't hit their intended target.
Right. Yeah. The Libya thing drives me up a wall because like even people in the anti-war space kind of just forget about Libya, and it's like, hey, we brought slavery back to Africa. You think that's kind of a big deal? You think we should be pissed about that? We should talk. We overthrew a sovereign country, the wealthiest country in Africa, and turned it into an open-air slave state. And it's like, Iraq's bad and Afghanistan's bad. We'll talk about that. But Libya just doesn't exist anymore. It's like,
but I don't know how much time you guys have. I know Gloria has to get ready for the Get Your Shit Together show. But I do want to give everybody a chance to let the audience know where they can find you. If you have donation links for legal defense funds or personal support, feel free. If you want to go first, David, then we'll just kind of swoop around the room.
I've got a GoFundMe. All donations, I appreciate it. It's called something like 50 years in jail for being a whistleblower against the Australian Defence Force. But at the moment, any publicity, if you can share, I'm on Twitter. Murdoch Cadell is my name on Twitter. And I'm just trying to get more publicity now. So anybody that can share me, I'd love to come on anyone's show. Yeah, that's the best way you can help at the moment. But you've already helped just by listening to my story today.
Yeah, definitely, Andrew. Give him my contact information because there's probably a lot of people's shows that I could get you on.
Yeah, I'll start a DM group.
Communities, for sure.
That'd be great. That'd be the best way to help.
You're always welcome on Anonymous Bites Back, David.
Yeah, I love that.
Who's going next?
Oh yeah, and I would absolutely love to have you, David, of course. So I do a show, as I said in the beginning. I just left my organization after over 4 years. I went off on my own. So you can find me on YouTube at Savage Joy Marie Mann. Also, I am starting a new show Monday with two comrades, and it is going to be on Compton J's other network, which is Populist Voice Network. And we have 8 new shows premiering next week. So it's going to be like a full-on network of different kinds of shows, different topics. And also, if anyone is in the LA area, October 24th, I will be in LA doing a book signing and also a comedy show with Jimmy Dore and Steph and Rick Overton and my co-author, Pat. So definitely check it out. Thanks again for having me, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us again. What about you, Magnus? What do you got going on?
Yeah, so I run a show on YouTube called Unity or Death, which is all about getting people in the activist spheres from all across the political spectrum to come together and have conversations and sort of form coalitions around issues like what we're talking about today and variety of things. So you can find that if you Google Unity or Death or my name, Magnus Panvidya, that comes up. And then I'm on Twitter, and I'm functionally banned off everything else. So that's the only place you can find me. They took down my Patreon yesterday, which was great. So, yeah, you can find me there. And definitely just right now have things coming up in the works with the mandate protests that are going on all over the country right now and a bunch of other stuff that we're currently focusing on. And then, obviously, in December, as Andrew's shirt hints to, we're doing a mutual aid event for End the Damn Wars. It's similar to kind of what Food Not Bombs does. We're going to raise a bunch of money for people and kind of use our anti-war platform to kind of bring up topics of like starvation through sanctions and other stuff like that and kind of, take a different path because that's what we like to do. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for having me on, Andrew.
Thank you very much, buddy. What about you, Gloria Jones? I know everybody knows you, but what's happening?
Yeah, I'm Glory. Y'all can find me on the ground and around. I'll be on Slow News Day later tonight in about 20-30 minutes for our call-in show. And then tomorrow I'll be putting out some coverage of the anti-mandate protest that's happening Saturday morning in Hollywood due to LA City's recent mandate requiring a vaxport for any basically like indoor entertainment venues and the like. So yeah, we'll be covering a protest against that tomorrow. Regarding other protests, if you're in the San Jose area, then October 12th at 9 a.m. outside the Robert Peckham Federal Courthouse, you can do an action there for Commander X, even though the hearing won't be going on at that time. And we will be waiting to hear when the next hearing is so we can hold another protest in conjunction with that. For any updates with that, please at @FreeCommanderX_ on Twitter. That's kind of our main hub for any updates regarding that case. And then we also do have a website, which is freecommanderx.org. And that's the updates for Commander X. Regarding Julian Assange, I'm going to say it on here so I can kind of like put it out there into the universe because with school and midterms coming up, I most likely won't be able to make it to DC for the appeal hearing on the 27th to 28th. But I do want to try putting something together in LA, some kind of like maybe rally to happen just to support Julian. Obviously, because it's LA, we'd be going to get like a lot of kind of people attention, maybe go out in front of like a mainstream media building like CNN in Hollywood or something like that. But yeah, I'm going to try to speak it into existence here because it's been a while since LA had an action for Julian, and I'd like to kind of try and get something going, especially because I've been covering protests for so long that, you know, I'd like to, well, no, I have been protesting too, but I mean, I'd like to do something for Julian as we really get closer and closer to crunch time in his case and just continually need to secure our right to journalism back because that's a fundamental right we have that can't be up to the jurisdiction of some imperialist cunts. So that's all I can think of. Catch me on Slow News Day. I'm co-host there. And I show up a lot on Anonymous Bites Back, so you can check that out too. And I also have a Hive blog. It's @0eclipse with 2 E's at the end. And I think that's everything. I know it's a lot, but I'm kind of all over the place.
Good. That's good.
But I have a little bit of news I want to cover for Steve Goes Live. So I appreciate everybody jumping in tonight. This was an awesome conversation. Yeah.
Yep. Well, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
I mean, I haven't gotten a StreamYard link yet, so I'll hang out in here until I get one.
Yeah, you guys are welcome to hang out. I'm just going to read terribly because I'm dyslexic. So.
Do you need me to help you read?
No, I got this. I prepared myself. I made slides.
Boy. Yeah.
So I wanted to.
Yeah, once I get a StreamYard link here, then I'll probably hop off. But
that's fine.
Until then.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Siggy Thordenson case and his new detention that's being put against him. So I want to. This is an article that was printed in Consortium News. I pretty much stole it in full, put it into slide form. So
okay, wait. Before you start with that, Lucky Burrito in the chat asked for me to get my little ACAB pig out and give it a squeak for Leo. Leo! Leo! Okay.
That's adorable. That's awesome.
I don't want to hurt anyone's ears, so I'll do a couple squeaks.
I'll screen share so you can see it too. If you want to read, dude, I'm totally down. I just don't want to make you involuntary co-host. I just feel like that would be rude.
Oh no, it's fine. I mean, it's news about Assange, like.
Yeah, where are we at? So, key witness against Assange arrested in Iceland. It's unclear if Thornton's recanting of his testimony is related to his arrest. He said the FBI promised not to tell Iceland about crimes he committed there but also said the deal would be off if he lied. Siggy Thordarson was arrested in Reykjavik on September 24th and is in Iceland's high security prison under a rarely invoked law that allows the police in Iceland to detain someone considered to be in the middle of a crime spree, Stundin said. Thordarson was brought before the judge after police requested indefinite detention intended to halt the ongoing crime spree. The judge apparently agreed that Thordarson's repeated and blatant ongoing offenses against the law put him at high risk of continued reoffending, Stundin said. Thordarson admitted in an interview with Stundin last month that he was engaged in ongoing criminal activity. Thordarson admitted in an early interview with Stundin in June that he lied to the FBI about Assange directly ordering hacking operations, a key element of the U.S. computer charge against the WikiLeaks founder. Thordarson was granted immunity by the FBI against prosecution in exchange for becoming an FBI informant in a sting operation against WikiLeaks in 2010. So, since you're still here, I want your opinion on this.
On what?
So just hear me out, right? Because I think Siggy's a horrible fucking person. He's a pedophile. He's a sociopath. He fucking was an FBI informant, which is like worse, almost worse than one of those things, but worse than one of them for sure. But at the same, not that he shouldn't be in prison because he literally admitted to financial crimes in the Stundin article, but the use of like indefinite detention, it almost seems like it's the Icelandic version of special administrative measures. And I was just wondering about if you had what you thought about potentially the over-incarceration of him or putting him in a higher prison than he actually needed to be in as a way to restrict him as a witness in Julian's appeal trial. Because it's going to be way harder to call on a witness that's in hyper-maximum security Nordic prisons than it would be, you know?
Yeah, but wouldn't that also be something that you could, again, use against the prosecution?
Yeah.
Because, like, if I were a lawyer in Julian's case, I'd be like, well, you know, I mean, I'd want to question the prosecution's witness at the stand, but he's in a supermax Nordic prison right now for being a certified sociopath and nonce. So that's where the prosecution is right now, just saying, Judge. And, you know, I'd be all, like, into that shit. But, I mean, then again, I'm also not a lawyer. So, like, I can't really speak to that. But at the same time, it's like, ugh, God.
I don't, like, he literally, if you read the interview, I'm sure I have it on one of the other slides, but he admits to, like, gross, like, actual real financial crimes and, like, shit that Iceland arrested people for a long time ago. So let me go back to my slides and I'll pull that one up. It's not clear if Thordarson's recanting of his testimony is related to his recent arrest. In the September interview, Thordarson said the FBI promised not to reveal to the Icelandic authorities any crimes he had committed in Iceland in exchange for his cooperation. Stundin reported that it is not clear to what extent the Icelandic authorities are informed about these arrangements, if at all. Indeed, Thordarson claims that he was assured by the FBI that no information would be shared with the Icelandic police about crimes he committed in Iceland, particularly the hacking attempts against Icelandic institutions. Siggy said, "My worry is that if I told them who was hacked and how, like that guy, and the government's websites and all that, I would become the target of Icelandic authorities." The reporter asked why. Siggy replied, "Eventually, I asked if the Icelandic authorities would get access to the data that I had talked about, and if the FBI said no, that would never happen. And that the only discussion I had with the FBI, that was the only discussion I had with the FBI about the Icelandic authorities." But Thordarson also said that he lied to the FBI, that if he lied to the FBI, the immunity deal would be off. The reporter asked, "The amount of pressure that you are under, mental, physical, from the FBI, if you aren't cooperating 110%, you're simply fucked." Siggy said that they would have already revoked this immunity deal if I was lying. The reporter said, "Is that really so?" And he said, "Yes, because they are basing a lot on just my word. It's stated many times in my arrangements that if I were to be caught out lying just one false word, the immunity agreement would be revoked, and that they could proceed with prosecuting me." Thordenson, 29, referred to as teenager in part of the U.S. indictment against Julian Assange that focuses on the events in Iceland where Assange was working with WikiLeaks in 2010 is key to the testimony in the computer intrusion charges against Assange, testimony which Thordenson has recanted. The indictment alleges that in early 2010, Assange asked teenager to commit computer intrusion and steal additional information, including audio recordings of phone conversations between high-ranking officials in NATO country 1, Iceland, including members of parliament of Iceland. But Thordenson told Student in June that this was a lie. The publication reported, in fact, Thordenson now admits to Student that Assange never asked him to hack or access phone records of MPs. His claims, yeah, we know the rest of that. But, so, Kevin Gostola goes over.
The prosecution's argument is literally the equivalent of watching a clown show within a dumpster fire that's been infected by smallpox before it gets atomic breathed on by Godzilla.
Yeah, that's a good definition, actually.
Yeah. It's a clown show legally. And it's always been that. I mean, you have a dude leading it so conceited he calls himself Mega Brain on his own website. Like, it's so surreal, and this is why, like, this is why I'll be a fucking menace about this shit, because look at what we're dealing with. Look at the levels of sociopathy that we're dealing with, to the point where we have to get crazy just to get people's attention, just to bring back some fucking balance in terms of winning this fight. Because, like, come on.
I actually have, I'm probably not going to have time for him tonight because I don't want to cut you guys off, but I have the Cassandra Fairbanks video pulled up for of her explaining the Rick Grinnell situation and how that all happened with removing Julian from the embassy from the U.S. side, and then the Operation Pelican article that is the UK side of removing Julian from the Ecuadorian embassy. So I'm going to drop those in chat for everybody to look over. But the whole thing with the CIA plot and the bullshit actual court proceedings is that's such a small portion. Like the UC Global case, as big as that is, that's literally like the end. Like that's like reading the epilogue of Julian in the embassy compared to the history of surveillance that happened before that, leading up to him being removed and UC Global taking charge.
And before you get to the next slide, I'm
that's my last slide. That's what
Oh, it was?
I did
okay.
it. I did it.
So, I already did my closeout, so yeah, y'all know where you can find me, on the ground and around. Come on, you know the thing. I did it like 5 minutes ago. I'm not gonna do it again because I suck at plugging myself. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I will see you all in chat in the Slow News Day channel. I hope, calling in for Get Your Shit Together. Peace. Love y'all.
And my name's Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, ZIGMUND. You can find our effort on action_4 Assange on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, I prefer you hop over to Rockfin, rockfin.com/A4A. We are set up with an account there. Do stream there regularly. We don't have any content. Please don't subscribe to us on Rockfin. Like, don't give us any money. Give like the actual content creators money. But thank you guys so much for hanging out. I dropped the link to the Operation Pelican article in chat for you guys to read through if you wanted to take a look and aren't familiar with that situation already. It's essentially the UK's effort to groom the nation of Ecuador to be able to send their police in at behest of the United States. So put in perspective with time and the information we now know from Yahoo News, it creates a really I don't know, bleak perspective of what was happening around that time in the last few months leading up to Julian being removed. I'll try to get like a nice timeline made that puts like Pelican and Rick Grinnell and all of that in line, because it's not really something, I don't think anyone's put all of these stories in context with each other across time yet. But with that, thank you everyone. I enjoyed you hanging out. I had a lot of fun tonight with our guests, so thank you very much to them for joining us. Yeah, and just keep doing what you can with the time and money that you have. If you're interested in hosting an event, we'll boost it for you. Hit up Candles for Assange. She has tons of local events listed right now. Alex was supposed to jump in, but she is out on a pier right now. But we'll probably have her next week. Thank you guys so much.